So good morning. I said I'd start us up at 9:01, so I'm going to get going. But we've still got lots of people pouring in. We've got actually quite a few more people registered than we were expecting. So welcome, everyone. My name is Nancy Worsfold. I'm the Executive Director of Crime Prevention Ottawa, and I've been involved in the Home Takeovers project here in Ottawa from the beginning. It started back in 2013, where we've developed this project over the last 9 years, and Donna is going to walk you through an excellent presentation about how the methodology that we've developed on dealing with these complex situations in people's residences. Donna has worked in the field of mental health and addictions for the last 25 years. And Donna Vendon Hoover has worked in the field for 25 years. And for the last 21, she's been with Options Bytown. So I do want to note that in the course of developing this project in Ottawa, we've developed it very much for our realities. And I note that we have an awful lot of our friends joining us from Sudbury and Thunder Bay. And so welcome, wonderful to have you. But I think one thing that you want to keep in mind while you're listening to the presentation, if you're not from Ottawa, is you've got your work to do, because Donna will be talking about our local partners and the local relationships that we've developed over the years. We've done a lot of training with some of our institutional partners like the police, the community housing providers and landlords and so on. You might want to keep in mind what you need to do in your community as well. I think our demographic realities are all very particular to the cities that we work in. So what we've developed has been working here in Ottawa, but you're going to need to think about your cities. But for the people from Ottawa, thank you for joining us. We're really proud of the interest from across Canada in our in this little training session, and I'm going to hand it over to Donna.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm going to start sharing my screen. We're going to ask that everyone hold their questions till the end so that you can, sorry, just something funny just happened on my computer, so I started talking. There we go. Oh, for heaven's sake. Just hold your questions. So I suggest you just have a little notepad ready so that if we're at a particular section, you can remember your question at the end. And then Nancy will ask you to raise your hand at the end. Share screen.
Okay, actually, Donna, I was so thrown by when we opened the computer this morning and realized that we had about 3 times more registrants that we had expected. Yeah. I realized that I forgot in my notes our land acknowledgement.
Oh yes, please do.
So this again is, because we were expecting this to be mostly Ottawa people, is an Ottawa-based land acknowledgement, but we looking through the registration, we actually have people from all across Canada. So I encourage you to think about the first residents of your area. So for Donna and I, Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We would like to honor the peoples and land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We would also like to honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, their elders, their ancestors, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. And I'm sorry for having interrupted you, Donna, and back to you. And I think that it's important, in particularly in this context where we're talking about home, to think about home in many, many iterations of home and how the colonial experience has impacted on so many of our fellow community members.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you doing that. Okay, share. There we go. Can everyone see my screen where it says home takeovers, Nancy? You can see it. I've got, oh, yay. Okay, it worked. So home takeovers. I'm Donna from Options Bytown. Come on, work with me. There we go. So I'm just going to minimize all your faces. There we go. A home takeover is a situation where a legitimate tenant or homeowner finds themselves unsafe physically, financially, psychologically because of the presence of people in their home that they may or may not be able to remove. So that's just the general definition of a home takeover. It's very broad, it's very big, and it's bigger than we think it is. So where did the interest for home takers come from? Was back in 2013, Crime Prevention Ottawa heard about these situations from service providers. So they commissioned an initial literature review called Cuckooing, Home Takeovers of Vulnerable Tenants. The researcher found that there was no information in North America. The only research that existed was in the UK. And they're the ones that coined that term cuckooing. They conducted a survey of 133 frontline workers, along with key informant interviews to develop the information in home takeovers of vulnerable tenants perspectives from Ottawa. We're not going to go through all the findings, but there are a few executive summaries here that you'd like to read the full report. You can find it on Crime Prevention Ottawa's website. A few quick facts. 72% of those surveyed had encountered at least one home takeover, 32% saying they'd experienced 10 or more. Because Crime Prevention Ottawa didn't know the extent of which home takers were an issue, the parameters for the survey didn't reflect the numbers beyond 10 plus. We're not entirely aware of how common these situations are. The majority of home takeovers occur in public housing, particularly in high-rise and low-rise apartment buildings. Single homes are the least common, and this describes many of the senior takeovers we've heard about, particularly when perpetrated by family members. I'm always asked if there's pockets in the city where it's more common. We can say yes, there are more in apartment buildings, but not to geographic pockets in the city. Generally speaking, those who are victims of home takeovers have a range of vulnerabilities, including addictions, mental health issues, disabilities, developmental disabilities. Isolation is probably one of the biggest factors. For example, those coming from a homeless shelter. There's no single catch-all resolution for home takeovers, especially considering how unique and complex these situations are. That said, home takeovers are generally resolved through a series of interventions and supports from multiple service providers, and often involve creative and personalized solutions based on the needs of the victims. Right now, we've kind of identified 4 different types of takeovers that we're identifying right now. So drug-associated or street violence takeovers, takeovers of the formerly homeless, and takeovers of elderly adults, and general takeovers of people with vulnerabilities such as physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, mental health issues, but isolation really is for all of these categories. We do know that there may be some other categories that might not quite fit into one of these boxes, and finding the right words for these categories is not exactly right, but one of the issues that we've noted over the years is, I guess, cultural may be the way to put it. Because if it's not our own personal, the frontline workers' cultural experience, we may not be aware of all the complexities behind it. The example I like to use is when I was working in one of our buildings, we had a woman come into the building and look for people that she identified with culturally, and went to knock on their doors, approach them in the lobbies, begging them for help with her son, that because they're from the same background and the same culture, they had to help her and her son. It was a requirement that she felt was culturally appropriate. There may be other categories that might fit into your particular situation, since not everyone's from the Ottawa area, but these are the main ones that we've noticed. Takeovers by sex workers is a type that we're also hearing about more often. It can be across all different types. They can go into any one of those categories. Adult children moving back with their family home and refusing to leave is another one. Sometimes this is related to drug usage or drug dealing. And there's a lot where we have multiple vulnerabilities present. Isolation is the biggest thing, that if we could break the isolation, it's our biggest hope. These include addictions and mental health, developmental disabilities, brain injuries, those kind of things. Every home takeover situation is unique, and they kind of go over they occur within a social context. There's housing shortages, I think, everywhere. Poverty, racism, vulnerability of the person causing the harm. So we changed the language around that a little bit lately, because we realize sometimes the person that's doing the takeover has their own extreme vulnerabilities and needs that sometimes it's best to address the person doing the harm. You have couch surfing with a friend or acquaintance, taking advantage of the vulnerabilities, the isolation, or targeted, drug or street violence related. Then we took it, how does this happen? So it's often a friend looking for a temporary place to sleep. It is, in instances we're seeing the private market are the same as the public market here. We do see a majority of takeovers in the Ottawa area are related to drugs, using and trafficking. The victim often has a history of substance abuse. Isolation will go over and over again. It plays a large role. Many clients are living on their own for the first time in many, many years. When leaving the shelter system, it can be very challenging to adjust to living independently. Encouraging connections within the tenant's new community can help them feel less isolated and allow them to begin to identify a new way of life. This can include introductions to the neighbors, attending local community centers, taking the time to orient the person to their new surroundings so they feel more confident, having open conversations prior to move-in about what their own personal guest policy is going to be, reducing harm by using outside of their unit and only bringing people over that they really trust. One of the examples that I like to use is the offering of free drugs, puppies, kittens, or things that are needed. This is a common tactic and on the increase. One of the saddest that I've seen was a man who was very much isolated, had some social behavioral problems, so wasn't able to connect to his neighbors. And one of his dealers came by one day in a massive rush and speaking really quickly and handed the guy a puppy and said, listen, the cops are after me, hang on to this puppy. I'm gonna be back and I'm gonna get it in a few days. And then took off. Well, fast forward a few weeks, this man is now bonded with this puppy. And the dealer comes back and says, listen, man, I gave you a puppy. You now owe me. And I'm going to take over your place for a while to deal out of here because the cops don't know I'm here. It's that fear of harm to the dog, threatening the dog, or whatever it may be. that's where these manipulation can come from, and how in depth, and it's the only thing they've connected to for years is that puppy or kitten. Leaving the shelter, incredibly isolating. They're looking for companionship. They're looking for protection, and family members are looking for support from parents. Family members is so difficult to deal with because it's often a parent or grandparent, often mother or grandmother, who really wants to protect and care for their grandchild or child from all the difficulties that they're facing at that time. But then that person is losing so much. Their child or grandchild is taking their medication, taking their money, their rent money. It's very complex when it's a family member. I'm trying to click here. There we go. What are some of the things that we notice that might alert us to this problem? We're looking for changes. That's the biggest word I really want to focus on. Not necessarily bad changes, but changes. So we're looking for changes in their physical appearance. We're looking for, is the person more withdrawn? Are they expressing that they're always out of money or food? Are they showing signs of weakness, weight loss, stress, or abuse? Have they told you that they've got a house guest? Changes in their physical apartment. Is the state of their house changing from the way it was? And the reason why I want you to focus on the word changes, not just messy or unkempt, is because sometimes people that are doing the home takeovers are suddenly cleaning up more. They're suddenly making that apartment look more appealing. So those are less common than making it more messy, but changes. If that person is most comfortable in a little bit clutter and mess, and suddenly everything's neat as a pin, and their property is being destroyed or disposed of when that's important to them, that's important to note. And are you hearing reports about this from people who know that person, neighbors, friends, family, that there's always visitors, that there's increased traffic, an increase in partying and noise? Those are the things we're looking for. Changes is really important. All right. One of the things that we talk about now is what can we do about this? What can we do to put ourselves to help this person? So the thing that I really like to talk about is your safety. In anything that you do, your safety is always the most important thing. I like to, people who are doing these takeovers don't like to be noticed. That's really important. But when we notice them, so it's important to notice them, and I call it notice with intention. You want to notice them, but in a friendly, approachable way. So in our buildings where I work, we work on site in just a normal social housing building. So I'll see people in the elevator that I suspect are doing the home takeovers. I'll look directly at them and I'll smile and I'll say hello to them, but I'll make sure they notice that I'm noticing them, because they don't want to be noticed. Non-confrontational. Again, your safety is number one. Check in with other service providers that might be involved with this client. Collaborate with them. CMHA, addiction supports, case managers. This is why it's really important when we're admitting clients into our programs that we anticipate problems like this in the future, particularly if they're coming out of shelter, is that we get consent signed right away. That we don't wait until the problem happens, because often it's difficult to get a hold of our clients. So we talk about scenarios ahead of time. If we're having troubles with things, do you want to sign consent now so that I can reach out to your other supports and get support if we need it? All right. And positive relationships. You need to build positive relationships with the client. You need to ensure that they know that you're there to support them, that you're not judging them about the home takeover. You're not judging the person who's doing the home takeover, particularly when it comes to family. A mother or father is going to protect their child no matter what age. You don't want to attack the child. You want to talk about the behaviors that they're doing. We want to work with the landlords. If you are the landlord, you want to work with the support workers. Making the environment uncomfortable for the person causing harm. That can mean more frequent unscheduled check-ins, door knocks, flyer drops, securities going through the area at an increased rate. whatever it might be, we want to make it uncomfortable for that person. Work with the client to implement a plan of action. The best person to know how to solve this problem is always the client. This is where we use techniques like motivational interviewing. All of our clients can agree they want to feel safe and they want their home to be their place of safety. Even if they may be a willing participant in this takeover, they always would like that to be their ultimate goal. So you can use your motivational interviewing skills to talk to the client to develop the plan of action. Encourage the client, or if you have to, report to the police. If you know a situation is happening right now, there's a crime in progress, call 911. You'll fix the relationship later. If someone's being harmed right now, call 911. Report a home takeover. Use the general reporting line or an online report. My best connections in Ottawa have been my community police officers. We also have some neighborhood response team, I think it is, that we're building great relationships with. But my first point of connection has almost always been my community police officers. I've worked with them to sit down. Clients that are experiencing a home takeover are scared to be seen talking to the police. My community police officers have met with me and my client off-site. They have met with the client to develop a plan of action. They are very much willing to work with your client where they're at. They come with a great legal perspective. I have worked with my community police officers to make a plan of action going forward in the future, saying, listen, this client, he doesn't want them knowing that he's talking to the police. So the community police officer will send himself or other officers he knows he can trust, and they'll knock on the door and act as if the client is not aware why they're knocking, so that they can go and help that client in that moment. I've also used my community police officer when we discovered there was a possible hostage situation happening in the unit. That was a situation where I happened to be with my community police officer at the time, and I was like, hey, listen, I've got this situation happening. What do you think is a good answer for this? Normally a hostage situation, you just call 911 if you're aware of that happening. Other things that we've done together is we work with our community housing, Ottawa Community Housing, with their tenancy workers. We have letters on file. We can do this with or without the client's cooperation. So some of these letters, we'll sit down with the client and say, listen, how about we write a letter and you show it to this person saying that them being there is putting your housing at risk. We're not actually going to put your housing at risk at this time because you're working with us, you're talking to us. But do you think it'll help to show this person this letter? Working with security, the landlord, knocking with them. I've met with clients and the landlord secretly. The client plays dumb, and then the landlord and I will go visit, and the landlord will play this tough guy saying, hey, listen, you're putting your housing at risk. You're doing, this person's got to go and they've got to go now. And the client plays dumb, like they have no idea why the landlord's there or how they got the information. Be creative in your solutions and work together as a team. The more different faces that are seen in this situation, the more it works. One of the questions, and I know we do have some participants from Ottawa today, that I keep getting asked is, how do I know who my community police officer is? So I've worked hard at this. They now have a central intake where you can just simply email that email address that's on the screen now, and they will tell you who your particular community police officer is for your area. The ones that I have worked with in Ottawa, which are amazing, in the South End, we've got Marcus. Oh, I'm going to mess this up if Marcus is on the call. Sebastiano. Brad Berlow is in the south of Ottawa. In the east, we've got Sebastian LeMay, Vianney Caltex. These are great officers. They will bend over backwards to help you and your client come to a safe, secure resolution. All right. In the pandemic, some things have been a little bit different. I'm hoping that this is coming to an end and we can take these slides out of this presentation. But all different agencies, we've noticed, have different abilities and levels of ability to be able to go out in the community and respond, be able to go into an apartment. So forming interagency relationships and communication is key. Finding out who can go out and do something for us. Recently, I had a coworker who was not able to get out in the community. They weren't allowed to leave their office, but the landlord has social workers here called tenant support workers. And we were able to get that person over the phone. My worker did all the primary work, and the landlord brought all our forms to that client to help get situation resolved. Forming those relationships is really important. Ask your management. So in Ottawa, we used to have a committee, and I think it still meets every now and then. I think it was called Merit, where many different key community partners would gather, and they couldn't share names, but they could share addresses. So, hey, we have this address. We are really concerned. Who can do what? So every agency is different what they can and can't share. When it's safety risks, it's important that we find support for each other. So ask if you can share apartment numbers, share addresses, as opposed to names with key partners if you don't have consent. Again, get those consents early. Find new ways to communicate with your clients. So during the pandemic, Options Bytown has formed our own Facebook accounts. So my Facebook name, my real name is Donna Vandenhoover, but my Facebook name is Donna Bernard, because that happened to be the office I was working at on Bernard Street when we created these, so that clients that can access free Wi-Fi, they can connect with us through Messenger. Keep it simple though. Use IT that clients know and understand. Don't complicate this. And also be aware that if you create a Facebook group and you're using the same device that your own personal social media is on, block yourself from your personal social media, and clients might pop up that are now on your Facebook page from work. Block them right away. Keep your personal information safe. Your safety is number one. Okay. All right. Get to know who the safe officers are to trust, not just for community police officers in the broader context. I know officers who stop by our offices to check in. How is everyone doing? This was really great recently for a client that we have that's profoundly developmentally delayed and is really being harmed in his home. The community police, because this officer stopped by, found out we're really worried about 212. They go and visit 212. Every other day, they send an officer that's trustworthy, that's not going to scare the client who is a little bit nervous around the police. Get to know them, get them to know your clients, formulate those kind of plans. Make a plan with your client that's a 2 or 3 attempt connection plan with clients. Tell them, if you don't answer the phone within 2 or 3 attempts, or check in within a certain time period, you're going to request a wellness check from the police. Let the client make that decision. What works for the client, let them take the lead. So get third-party consent with clients to check in with them using the pharmacy maybe, or methadone clinics, family, friends. Get those consents so that you can find another way to connect with them if the traditional way doesn't work for them. And my agency in particular, we have a spot. We work in this spot. We don't leave our spots. We're being creative, going outdoors, meeting with these people away from their spot. If it's a safety risk for the client, be a little bit flexible and get off-site to meet with them if that's what works. At the beginning of the pandemic, we certainly had a lot of the Social Planning Council had some cell phones and cell phones with plans. Connect with local resources that take in used cell phones, because a cell phone without a plan can still call 911 and get those to your clients. Any way that client can connect outside of their home is great. And even cell phones that don't have plans can still connect to Wi-Fi, can still go to free Wi-Fi, malls, libraries, that kind of thing. And they can find ways to connect with you using those used cell phones. So my job specifically is working with our Ottawa community housing. However, my coworker's not here today, works just in the private market setting. Sometimes things change quite a bit within the private market setting. So it may be different in the way that the structure of the home visit is, or people present. It may be safe or not safe to enter a unit. You may see signs of increased use, anxiety, nervousness, reluctance from the client to return to the unit. You notice they're going back to the shelter even though they have a home. Finding ways to communicate with the landlord, but safely. Assess the landlord's awareness of the situation while balancing privacy. Not all landlords are supportive. So there's a way you can ask those questions saying, hey, is there anything more I can do to support my client with their tenancy right now? How do you think the tenancy is going for George? I'll be seeing George this week. Are there any messages you'd like me to pass on? The more we communicate with these landlords, the more that they will give us information instead of just going to eviction. If they think that they have a willing partner to work on the situation, it's much more cost effective for them to get the situation resolved as opposed to just going to eviction. I apologize, I have a coworker in the other office who is making a lot of noise. Identify what your role is with the private landlord, discuss strategies with the landlord, let them know about informal warning letters. And instead of, if you get to that stage, issuing formal notices for eviction, but let them know about all the other things they can do beforehand. Don't assume that a private landlord knows all these options. A lot of them are small landlords who don't have accesses to the same resources that we have. And use this opportunity to educate the landlord about home takeovers once we are sure that the landlord is aware of the situation. Always balance privacy and safety. So aftercare, once we get a situation resolved, remember that first slide where we said how many of these are reoccurring? Our clients' lives are not dramatically changing day to day. We're not fixing all their situations. They're still isolated. They still have addictions or mental health issues. So we want to formulate plans once a situation is resolved to help with a possible next situation or prevent a next situation. So you want to make sure you have frequent check-ins with you and other service providers. Work with the client to determine what kind of supports are needed to reestablish a positive environment, whether it's cleaning up their home after a massive takeover, getting out into the community again. Education about home takeovers. I was surprised, and I think I'm a little bit jaded sometimes after being here so many years. I had a client who I've known for years, trusts me immensely. They happened to be walking through a local mall, and the landlord that we work with decided to set up a booth in that mall one day about home takeovers. I thought, this is ridiculous. Why are you setting this up in a mall? But my client went up and chatted with them because they happened to recognize the landlord. And as they were chatting with this landlord, they realized they're about to enter a home takeover situation. They never heard of this before. Then the landlord told them, go talk to Donna about this. Donna's got a lot of information, can help you with this. And the client was able to come and talk to me. So education can never be done enough, I'm finding. I was surprised that worked, but it worked amazingly well. The client wasn't aware of all these key factors that are ahead of time. Someone asking about staying on the couch for a while could develop into something more. Talking about it to people that you don't think are your typical person that will have this issue is important. Having posters and signs up. Crime Prevention Ottawa has made a lot of great publicity about this. Use those resources. Safety planning with the client. Key questions about who they want in their unit, they don't want in their unit. What would they do if unwanted people show up? What will they do if it happens again? How do they identify? How do they reach out for help? And it's safe to reach out for help. Reduce isolation, encouraging positive connections within the community. Getting out, finding those little things in our communities that are going on, getting them out of their units as much as possible to help them feel an important part of their community. Again, get those consent forms filled in at move-in or before move-in. They're very important. Individuals that we know are using, encourage them to find safe alternative locations to use other than the building they're living. If the dealers know where they're living, they're going to come there and they're going to take advantage of it. So the home takeover tools that I was just mentioning are on the CPO website. So I always forget the address for the CPO website. So I simply Google CPO home takeovers and amazing resources pop up every time. I don't think I have the links. Oh, I might still have the links in here. So I will show you the guidebook for service providers. Oh, let's see if this works.
I just threw them in the chat, Donna.
Oh, wonderful. So this is the guidebook. Can everyone see it, Nancy? They came along with me?
No, I
No?
put it in
Okay,
the
it didn't
chat so that
work.
they could
It's in the
check
chat.
it
Okay,
themselves.
perfect. So those resources are wonderful. Please use them, share them as much as possible. We had the postcards, they're little cards that sat on our desks, and it triggered conversations with clients that didn't think about it. All the research is also available on the Crime Prevention Ottawa website.
I would note that we've been very happy for people to repurpose our materials with your local phone numbers on it. So just get in touch with us. We'd like to receive copies of what you've done so that we can take a look. But a lot of our resources, all of our resources have Ottawa phone numbers, but feel free to get in touch if you want to reuse the material.
Crime Prevention Ottawa did an amazing job also about creating some videos. I'm not going to play the videos now, but they're also on the Crime Prevention Ottawa website. You'll see some wonderful Ottawa community housing staff people doing some great acting jobs, and some clients in Ottawa playing roles as well. They're great in giving some solution ideas, showing to clients, showing to family members. And that is our main presentation. Before we get to questions, I just want to talk about, I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Be aware, please, this is not a confidential setting. If you're going to ask a question about a specific scenario, please alter it enough. Don't share details about who those people are that are suffering from that, so that other people can identify those people. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, now is a good opportunity. Please raise your hand. Oh, Melissa, if you want to unmute, I see your hand first.
Hi there. I just wanted to first of all say thank you for a fantastic presentation. I'm a lawyer at a community legal clinic here in Ottawa. So I also just wanted to make note that it's not a general question, but more of a comment, that our clinics are also available for any clients who are facing eviction. We're also a great support for anyone to reach out to, especially across Ontario. If there are any individuals who are going through this, it's really helpful, I think, to work with us as well as the landlords to assist in the client, make sure that they're also protected. And again, we don't want them to get evicted. It's not, they're the victims in this whole thing. So reaching out to the community legal clinics is another great resource, and I'm happy to provide our link in the chat if that's okay with you guys.
And also, that's a great point. None of the landlords, particularly the community landlords, want to evict anyone if they feel like that's their only recourse. Sometimes that is the solution, in terms of the person who is the victim is willing to accept help at that point in time. So it's kind of like the very last step anyone ever wants to do. But if we do get to that point, I'm so glad to hear the community legal system is here as well, because sometimes at the mediation stage, that's when we can get some support in there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? I see there's 11 things in the chat room, but I don't know what they are. So the question regarding advocating for changes to CLTB to allow people to be removed, that's not really my role. That would be my management or executive's role to do the advocating, because we're so busy doing the frontline work itself. But absolutely, I'm always on board for advocating changes to the LTB.
So
I'm trying to read the questions.
usually these sessions are very chatty, and we leave a lot of time to workshop through different ideas. And I just want to note, we've had a bit of a technical difficulty we didn't realize that
There's a capacity.
The capacity. We didn't realize how many registrants we had, because we had a lot of registrants in the last day. We went over our limit. So actually, no, there's space now for one person because our limit is 100.
I saw the person trying to join was Brad, who was one of the wonderful community police officers. So
well, we've now got nobody in the waiting room, but
okay.
I would just note
Sarah has a question also. Go ahead, Nancy.
If you're not listening, if you could sign off so that somebody else could come in.
Oh, two participants raised their hand. Oh, good.
Yes. So
first, Sarah.
Sarah,
you had your hand up first.
Not really like a question, but just a comment. I'm from Thunder Bay, Ontario. So what I've noticed in this area, particularly because it happened to my sister, is that Airbnbs are now being rented by gang members, and they go very unnoticed because they do keep it straight as a pin, and they're typically quiet until, you know, they kill somebody in the Airbnb. Right?
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
just notice that.
Yeah, I've heard of Airbnbs being taken over a bit. It's certainly less than all of our other ones, but yeah, that is something that's going on. Robin, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So I too am in Thunder Bay. So we work with families that have involvement with child welfare within our program, and much of my team is on this call. So a lot of our clients are within social housing networks, you know, relying on OW. Just a couple of quick comments. So with our transient Indigenous population that go between reserves, on reserve and off reserve, you know, I was really surprised because we don't really look at the family piece as a home takeover, but I mean, I definitely do know of overcrowding within social housings and things like that because, you know, family members end up in the city for medical purposes, and they're, you know, finding affordable options for somebody to stay during medical procedures. Could be long-term dialysis, could be mental health supports, things like that. So that is, I've never really looked at that as through the lens of a home takeover. You know, and so that was an interesting perspective for me. The other thing was, and definitely we know family members taking advantage of older parents, grandparents, things like that. There is, again, that cultural piece though. And so very much that's a very cultural kind of dynamic and dichotomy, because the perspective of family and how you look after that is very different in comparison to mainstream. But one of the things that we are seeing as a trend is young single moms who are now using formula, baby formula, as well, you were talking about puppies, you know, I'll get you formula, I'll get you formula, I'll get you this, I'll get you that. So we're seeing things like that, you know, the cost of these kind of things. So I loved the strategies that you were putting out there, but I mean, keeping, you know, I have a team meeting after this one, and I'm hoping we'll continue this discussion, but you know, it was interesting perspective though, the whole family thing. And I don't think that we would actually get the support of the residents under the family thing. Just
well,
because
that's where you get, it's the hardest one for me personally to deal with is the family.
Yeah.
It's, many of my coworkers say that the drug takeover is the hardest. I find those the easiest to take over because it's clear lines.
Well, and the other thing we do not have, we used to have community policing. We do not have community policing. So that creates another challenge. There are a couple of areas in the city that still, I believe, have occasional community policing, but we don't have dedicated officers to a certain area, things like that. We used to have that years ago through cuts and whatever else. That's no longer in existence. I hope that our District Social Services Administrative Board is who oversees our social housing and our you know, Ontario Works and all of those kind of programs. I really hope that they're on this call or taking part in this as well. I think it's just really important. It is a large proponent of putting families at risk. It's a large proponent of the issues within social housing here. It is happening on the regular market as well. The influx and, you know what, I mean, funny that Ottawa's putting this on, but I mean, the influx of where our drug trade and gang involvement in Thunder Bay is from Ottawa. We are a target community, and I'll assume you said, I think Sault Ste. Marie or Sudbury was also on this call. I will assume it's the same for them. So what used to be out west with Indian Posse, Native Syndicate, things like that, is no longer the biggest threat or much of a threat compared to the Ottawa gangs coming up in here. We're seeing gun violence that we've not seen in the past, and those kind of implications. So just wanted to share that a little bit. So thank you for this, and I do appreciate your guys taking the time and allowing us to join. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Donna, if I could just, Robin, I think it's important when we're talking about home takeovers in a family context to acknowledge and celebrate that people have a right to have visitors, and people have a need to have, healthy relationships with family, and family can be and should be a rich and important part of life. It only becomes a home takeover when it is putting the rightful tenant at risk, particularly of being evicted. So, and a lot of what Donna was talking about with regards to reducing isolation speaks to also the importance of supporting healthy relationships between people. I know that one of our key partners who works with the developmentally disabled community puts on workshops for their clients about friendship, so to help those clients identify and develop healthy friendships, healthy relationships. And that's just something to think about, because people have a right to have guests, and that should be a positive thing in their life. And what we're talking about is when that has become negative and put them either physically at risk or their tenancy at risk. And the other common situation is where their stuff is being stolen in a major way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the comment about the police, some of the things that Crime Prevention Ottawa did that was amazing, that I did forget to mention during the presentation, was our 911 operators have now been trained to the keyword home takeover. So if one of us calls, they can simply say the word home takeover, and that triggers the system to be aware of what we're talking about, so that the language is shared in common. And also, while we do have amazing community police officers, we also have amazing frontline officers here. Most officers go into this for a good reason. So it's important that us frontline social workers, frontline workers, form good relationships, good working relationships with the frontline officers that are in our communities as well. There are absolutely empathetic officers who will work with us wherever we are, and to form good working relationships with them is important. Dawn, I see your hand up.
Hi there. Thank you for the discussion today. I just wanted to say I'm coming from the regional municipality of York, and I found the conversation very interesting. We've recently just approved our community safety wellbeing plan for our region. We're a little bit behind on that, but this topic is kind of present in mind for me, and I come from a policy background, so I'm not working frontline. So it's very interesting conversation that I'm listening to today. So I just want to say thank you for that. But I guess my question, or just wanting to hear your thoughts. I'm not sure personally how much we're currently doing in the region around supporting clients with home takeovers. So that's something I need to learn for myself. But if we don't have a strategy in place, or we don't have a policy, do you have any recommendations on where we should start? Because it seems like this is probably an issue that many of our frontline staffs are having to support clients with, but we don't necessarily have any kind of structure in place or a program in place to really get the community partners behind us and on board. So I guess what I'm wanting to hear from you is, where do we start? What's the first step? If you could speak to that. It sounds like having partners, having good partners with the police is really important. But if there's any other advice or recommendations you could give to me that I could bring back to our team to see kind of what we are doing. And I think also another thing I would like to hear more about is the education piece, because you did mention that in your presentation. And I think it's important, like just, I'm learned a lot. I didn't even know this was a thing, if I'm being honest. And that sounds horrible that I work in the region, I'm supporting human services, and I didn't really realize that this is as prevalent as it is. So I definitely think there's a need for education. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that too.
I'll start, Nancy, just from the frontline workers perspective, what I can suggest, and then we'll go to the policy level, you, Nancy. So my agency, when we started, I can remember I went to many trainings. I kept hoping for new information is what I was hoping for. And that's how I became a trainer, is I just kept going to the exact same thing over and over again. And they're like, why are you back, Donna? And I'm like, I want this solution, because we're seeing it, I'd say on an agency level, at least a daily basis. And then my agency we have a shared drive amongst our agency. And in that shared drive, we have a folder just for home takeovers and what you can do. I'm still asked daily by my coworkers, what can we do? So training for frontline workers, and get the training out to them. It's important that the frontline workers feel confident and comfortable in the solution. That's what I'd say from this kind of perspective, and get as many trainers as possible. Once you've taken the training, everyone here is now a trainer. Go for it. Bring the information forward. Share the information you've got. Go ahead, Nancy.
Well, first to your question is about any discussion in Toronto. There's a mental health organization called the Dream Team who've been doing some work on this. And there's also a project in Ottawa Community Housing, I think it's the Eastern region, who are doing some work on this. They've been in touch with me. But if you email us, I can probably put you in touch with those local partners. From my point of view, watching this project develop from a communications point of view, the most important thing was just the idea of a word and the idea of a concept, because so many of the individuals that we see being victimized in this manner need themselves to develop a sense of agency and a sense that they have a right to be safe at home, because too many very vulnerable people accept situations which they shouldn't have to, because everybody should feel safe at home. And so part of the work has been encouraging that sense that you have a right to be safe at home, and that it's not your fault, and that people will help you, because often people get blamed in these situations. And part of the work, I know Donna has been very positive about police. You wouldn't have heard that a number of years ago in this project. The police often just arrested people in these situations. So we've done a lot of work with the Ottawa Police in terms of training officers, but also training their telephone operators in terms of being able to see complex victimization, so that they don't just go in and arrest everybody, particularly when we've got situations in which there's drug dealing out of somebody's unit when they really are not in control of a situation. You want there to be some concept of nuance, and that took some time to develop. It doesn't always work at the moment, but it's, we've gotten further than where we were when we started.
And allow for growth of that. So one of the examples I use is, I'm the trainer in this, and I called 911 about a home takeover situation, and the operator wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of convince her I knew what I was talking about. And that's okay. It's just a learning opportunity, is the way I've changed my perspective. Before I get frustrated with this, now it's a learning opportunity.
And we've also kind of generally taken an approach also of seeing it important that communities take care of each other. So encouraging, particularly in our very, very vulnerable buildings, putting up posters, encouraging people to look out for each other and not just to blame their neighbor, because often in a home takeover situation, there is some extra noise, extra disruption in the building because of what's going on in a unit, and you don't want that to dissolve into a situation where neighbors are in huge conflict. You want people to be looking out for each other and seeking solutions for everybody's safety. So thinking about it from the how you build community, thinking about how you build a service provision infrastructure which can see the complexity of these situations. And then also, just as Donna described, some very, very creative responses. There are no easy answers to these situations, but it's really important that we not just let them fester.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can I just ask one more question, just in terms of the training that you're speaking of? Is this like, and I'm sorry, forgive me for my ignorance, but is this like a Ontario-wide kind of training, or is it something that just Ottawa's developed and doing within Ottawa? How, if we wanted to, how could we tap into kind of those resources?
Well, you can't, because
So it's not like it's more centralized to Ottawa, then it's not like something that's for across
localized,
Ontario.
I would call
Localized,
it.
yeah.
Localized. Okay. I mean, we yeah, like this was a local project that has garnered interest, and we're happy to give you some advice about starting your own project. But really, it's a process of working through your partners, and key partners being service providers who work with vulnerable individuals, landlords, and police, and then communities themselves, so that they can identify and protect themselves.
And I'd add to that also, find some frontline workers that are currently doing the work, who are really keen and interested in this, and bring them on board in the planning. Yeah. We have a lot to offer from this perspective. We're doing the work. So that's why I think bring them in. I think Lisa had a question.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So my name is Lisa Alguire. I'm a public health nurse with the Grey Bruce Health Unit. So I just was going to kind of respond to Dawn's questions, because here in Grey Bruce, we were in a similar kind of spot last fall, where our county housing staff identified home takeover as an issue that was happening. They were seeing it more and more happening in some of our social housing. So it just happened that I was participating in a partnership meeting when they were talking about this scenario happening more and more. Nobody knew the term home takeover at the time, but when I came back to the health unit and chatted with some staff, we connected with our librarian and did a bit of a lit review, and found out that there was the term home takeover. And then we connected with Ottawa, looked at, some of your resources available through Ottawa. And at that point, what happened for us was we invited a number of partners to the table just for an initial conversation around the issue. And we found that there were so many people. I think we had over 30 members of our community partners attend the initial meeting. Everybody could identify with this issue happening in their work, and they were really intrigued by the term and some of the literature we had found, and moving forward as a collaborative partners group. So since November, we've been meeting as an advisory group to really put our heads together and develop a response framework, so that we could collaboratively prevent, identify, respond to, and provide recovery from home takeovers. So we have kind of gone through the process of a stakeholder survey at that initial meeting. We again, there was no kind of local data. It wasn't quantified at the local level, the prevalence of home takeovers. So we did do an initial stakeholder survey. 99% of the surveys identified that this was happening in their work, but they were not aware of the term, as I mentioned. So we have developed kind of a project logic model evaluation framework, a project charter. We've divided our group into 4 working groups because we had just so much participation, and using and adapting a lot of Ottawa's work. So thank you, Ottawa, for leading the way. But in terms of the resources and the guidebook, we've adapted some of that to address our local situation, and we're really engaging with our Indigenous communities and organizations as well to get that cultural perspective. But yeah, I feel like we've really moved along with this project, but that's how it started for us, was just bringing people to the table to have an initial discussion and local awareness, and to see how we were currently responding to this issue. So I'd be happy to chat anytime, Dawn, about the process that we've worked through so far.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. It's great.
Are there any other people who want to raise their hand? So I've been getting a lot of requests lately for training of other groups outside of Ottawa. But again, my specific role is I am currently a frontline worker doing the actual frontline work. I take some time out of my job, and my agency lends me out to do this. But I'm, now that the pandemic's coming to an end, I'm running out of time. So I'm not really willing to do any more, a lot more training outside of Ottawa or my agency. So to that question about that, yeah. But this presentation was being recorded, and I think Nancy said she'll share it with people.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to chat about that, Dawn. I was thinking maybe we could just post it to our website.
That might be the easiest. So I consider you all trainers now. So the question that's popping up in the chat, I see. That's how I became a trainer, literally. I just attended one of these training sessions. I have coworkers coworkers at Ottawa Community Housing who've taken this training, who also do the training within their agencies. To practice, I haven't done this in a while. I trained my agency again last week. That's why we advise is you guys take all this information that you've got and you bring it back to your agencies that are out there.
And you need to have the conversation about what this looks like in your neighborhood if you're not from Ottawa, because I think that things are different in every community, and what has worked with us might not work in other places. Just you need to adapt to your local realities. So we're not seeing
any more hands. If anyone has a scenario they'd like to ask about.
Because often we've kind of, in these meetings, when these trainings, when they've been a little smaller, is we workshopped through some challenging situations that workers were dealing with, while being careful not to mention any identifying information. But
it's okay if you don't. Yeah. Oh, Melissa has a question.
Well, sorry, I was just thinking perhaps if we can do that part, because not that I don't have a specific example, but perhaps if we stop recording at this stage, people might be more willing to come forward with certain examples. I don't know if that would be something we're willing to do just for this part of the exercise.
Actually, that makes sense to me. So sure, we'll
I'm noticing quite a few scenarios coming up in the chat. Maybe you can comment or discuss those.
Okay.